A seemingly normal marriage conceals a frightening secret, a husband with a twisted desire to practically swallow his wife, in a narrative that is too horrible to comprehend. Everyone around him is in amazement at the awful reality of his dark passion as his filthy fantasies come to light. This is the terrifying story of how love turned into an unfathomable horror. We explore the unsettling story of a guy whose cannibalistic impulses almost resulted in a horrific disaster in this true crime documentary. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment below if you find the deepest recesses of the human mind to be fascinating. With your help, we can expose more terrifying true crime tales. The residence of Andrew and Jessica Howard was tucked away in the center of this charming neighborhood. The Howards seemed like the ideal couple to their neighbors. Rich, pretty, and incredibly in love. Andrew worked as a financial analyst for a famous company and was well known for his calm disposition and keen intellect. He exuded authority from colleagues and neighbors alike with his towering frame and penetrating blue eyes. Jessica was a rising star in the community's artistic scene who embodied elegance and originality. Her vivid paintings graced the walls of the city's galleries, attracting admirers from a great distance. The Howards' existence appeared to be a fairy tale for many years. They threw classy dinner parties, went to neighborhood functions, and were frequently spotted walking hand in hand in the park. Their elegant Victorian house with a rounded porch made them the talk of the neighborhood. Their apparently ideal partnership is attested to by its immaculately maintained rose garden. Autumn was approaching, and the picture-perfect exterior started to crumble. The real story behind the idyllic existence that the Howards presented would soon rock the sleepy village to its foundations. The story of Andrew and Jessica Howard started long before they ever got together, molded by events that would eventually prepare the audience for the impending disaster. The suburban ideal that Andrew Howard would eventually pursue was not what he experienced as a child. Andrew, who was raised in a dilapidated apartment on the outskirts of the city by a single mother, discovered early in life that love was a finite resource. Due to his mother's addiction, Andrew was frequently left on his own alone as she went through a string of abusive relationships. Andrew showed symptoms of compulsive behavior from a young age. He would become obsessed with things or concepts, refusing to let go until he had thoroughly investigated them. This quality helped him succeed academically, helping him get to the top of his class in spite of a difficult upbringing. But it also showed up in more unsettling ways. When they spent time with other people, Andrew reacted with acute jealousy, becoming protective of the few friends he had made. As he got older, Andrew used his obsession to focus on his academics and was awarded a scholarship to a prominent university. He completely changed who he was there, eschewing the shackles of his poor upbringing and assuming the role of an intelligent, driven young man. But beneath the smooth surface, his childhood wounds still showed. Andrew's childhood was very different from Jessica Hartley's. Brought up in a devoted, creative household, she was inspired to pursue her creativity at a young age. Her parents encouraged her to pursue her aspirations and developed her talent as educators. There was music, laughing, and the smell of oil paints in Jessica's early years. Jessica's artistic ability flourished during her adolescence. The way she combined surrealist themes with vivid colors made her stand out to local gallery owners. Jessica was already well known in the art world when she enrolled in college to study fine arts. Andrew and Jessica initially came into contact during a charity fundraiser. The vibrant artist instantly captured the attention of Andrew, who was now a rising star at his financial firm. Andrew's charisma and intensity drew Jessica in return. Their passionate and romantic courtship was intense, with Andrew giving Jessica extravagant presents and his undivided attention. After 6 months, Andrew asked Jessica to marry him and gave her an exquisite diamond ring. Adorned by the fantasy romance, she agreed. Their wedding was the season's biggest social gathering, taking place in a gorgeous vineyard. Neither of them could have predicted the somber turn their love story would take after they exchanged vows. Jessica Howard and Andrew seemed like a match made in heaven to the outer world. However, as they became used to married life, the gaps in their foundation started to show, which started a series of events that would end in unspeakable horror. The Howards' early marriage was characterized by sincere joy and adoration for one another. As Jessica's spouse, Andrew took great pride in going to gallery openings with her, and luxuriating in the successes reflected warmth. For her side, Jessica felt truly recognized and appreciated for the first time in her life and found Andrew's devotion to be intoxicating. The pair hosted elaborate dinner parties for their expanding group of friends at their Sycamore Lane house, which became into a center of social activity. Andrew used to entertain guests with stories of his money exploits. Jessica's warmth and charisma made conversation easy for everyone who knew them, but the Howards appeared to have it all: love, success, and a promising future. However, as the months stretched into years, minute changes in their relationship's dynamics started to take place. Once completely focused on his profession, Andrew's innate predisposition toward obsession was now fully directed toward Jessica. He started observing her actions and asking her about her everyday routine, and becoming more and more agitated whenever she was apart from him. Jessica first thought Andrew's possessiveness was endearing and saw it as evidence of his intense love for her. He would ask pointed questions, and she would laugh them off, telling him he had nothing to worry about. However, as his actions became more intense, she began to feel choked by his incessant demands for her presence and attention. Andrew's fixation became more and more domineering. Fearing for Jessica's safety, he insisted on taking her to and from her studio. He started critiquing her outfit selection, offering more subdued alternatives that would not draw notice from other guys. Andrew responded with barely concealed disgust when Jessica mentioned reaching out to galleries in other cities for her artistic endeavors, stressing the need to concentrate on their shared life. Andrew's insecurity increased as Jessica's career took off. Not as a loving spouse, but as a vigilant protector, he was always on the lookout for any danger to his bond with her when they went to her art openings. Andrew would insinuate himself into conversations about Jessica's art when fans approached her, his arm firmly encircling his wife's waist. Back at home, Andrew started slowly chipping away at Jessica's self-assurance. He would casually remark on the subjective nature of art and wonder if her success was really due to skill or just fads coming and going. With a smile and a kiss, these comments gradually undermined Jessica's confidence. At first, Jessica was engrossed in the whirlwind of her growing celebrity and was unable to fully see the degree of Andrew's behavioral changes. She told herself it was only a phase they would get through together, attributing his mood swings and increased neediness to stress at work. But the distance between them grew as Andrew's devotion did. Jessica discovered that she was controlling her conversations. She started to distance herself from friends, carefully weighing her comments to make sure they wouldn't incite jealousy or criticism from Andrew. Rescheduling last-minute plans to satisfy her husband's insistence on her being there all the time. Jessica would stare at her half-finished canvases while she was alone in her studio and Andrew was at work. She would feel the spark of creation that had once blazed so brightly start to fade. She was plagued by a persistent sense that something was seriously off in her marriage. But there was an unnamed fear that came with the idea of facing Andrew. Jessica had no idea that there was something far darker and more dangerous than she could have ever imagined hiding underneath Andrew's increasingly unpredictable behavior. His fixation increased as, so too did the twisted fantasies that would ultimately lead their love story to its horrifying conclusion. A new, unsettling aspect started to seep into Andrew's mind as his fixation with Jessica grew. Late at night, Andrew would explore the deepest reaches of the internet while sitting in the blue glow of his computer screen, while Jessica slept soundly next to him. What started off as a casual curiosity quickly developed into a full-blown obsession with the macabre and forbidden. After reading extensively about the Donner Party and the ceremonial customs of ancient nations, Andrew discovered that he was intrigued to historical narratives of cannibalism. He read true crime stories about murderers who had eaten their victims, and his thoughts raced with a combination of disgust and intrigue. As the weeks went by, his internet searches grew more focused and unsettling. The preparation of human flesh, the effects of eating human flesh, and the legal ramifications of cannibalism. A terrifying fantasy started to take shape in the back of his confused mind. Andrew dreamed of literally devouring Jessica, not simply in the same way he had with his possessive actions. The notion of genuinely possessing her in every manner, of assimilating her into himself permanently, developed into a complete fixation. Andrew found it difficult to keep up his active normalcy during the day. He went through the routine at work, his thoughts always returning to his sinister fantasies. He used to catch himself glancing down at his colleagues' throats during meetings, curious about the flavor and texture of human flesh. He was both excited and disgusted by these thoughts, which further strained his already fragile mental state. Andrew started acting more and more strangely at home. He would keep a close eye on Jessica as she went around the house. His eyes lingered on her skin's softness and the contour of her neck. He would pose odd questions about her diet and workout regimen throughout dinner, posing them as health concerns but really evaluating her as possible food. Unaware of the actual nature of Andrew's thoughts, Jessica, after attempting to calm him down and attributing his strange behavior to stress, she recommended that they take a vacation in the hopes that Andrew would be able to unwind without work. The notion of spending time alone with Jessica, away from prying eyes, however, fueled Andrew's dark fantasies. As his obsession deepened, Andrew started to see omens and signals everywhere, leading him to believe that fate was guiding him in the direction of his horrific objective. A restaurant's rare steak turned into a message from God. An invitation appeared when Jessica cut her finger on a piece of paper and a drop of blood appeared on her artwork. Andrew recognized that his ideas were incorrect. That they went beyond what any reasonable person would consider. He would have intense feelings of humiliation and self-loathing during periods of clarity. He thought about getting treatment, even going so far as to look up local therapists. But he was constantly stopped back by his fear of being discovered, of losing Jessica and the life he had created. Rather, Andrew withdrew even further into his own bizarre fantasy world. He started journaling. Stowaway in a closed drawer in his home office, he wrote a violent and unsettling account of his desires. With each page turned, Andrew sensed that he was becoming farther off from reality and getting closer to the point of no return. The appearance of normalcy started to fade as summer gave way to autumn. Jessica discovered that she had to tread carefully in her own house because she could no longer ignore her husband's changes. Andrew was starting to exhibit more noticeable mood swings. His actions are becoming more erratic. Jessica was getting ready for a big meeting with a prominent New York gallery owner one crisp Saturday morning. Andrew emerged at the bathroom doorway as she finished putting on cosmetics, his eyes black with barely suppressed rage. Asking why she was dressing up so much, he accused her of trying to draw attention from other men. Andrew lost it when Jessica attempted to clarify the significance of the meeting, causing her meticulously organized portfolio to fall to the ground, strewing drawings all over the tile. Startled and alarmed by this outburst, Jessica gave serious thought to calling off the meeting. However, a little voice inside her, one that had been becoming more and more insistent over the past few months, begged her not to cave into Andrew's domineering actions. She gathered her sketches in shaky hands and headed out to the meeting. The episode was a turning point in their relationship, despite Andrew's intermittent cries for forgiveness and threats. Jessica started to notice details that she had hitherto disregarded or overlooked. The way Andrew insisted on cooking all of their meals himself, claiming it was a sign of his love, while scrutinizing every bite she took, the way his eyes would linger on her throat during chats, and the peculiar sparkle in his eye that made her tremble. Jessica confided in Beatrice, her best friend, about her mounting concerns regarding Andrew's actions. She was urged to go by Beatrice, presenting her with a spare room as a refuge. However, Jessica hesitated because she was still holding on to the man she had fallen in love with. She talked herself into believing that she could help Andrew become his old self if only she could figure out what was bothering him. In the meantime, Andrew's dark dreams and fixation with Jessica were causing his professional life to fall apart just as quickly as his personal one. Gave him little room to concentrate on his work. He started making thoughtless mistakes, missing deadlines, and losing his temper with coworkers. His career, which had once seemed promising, was now in jeopardy. His movements through the office were accompanied by worried looks and muttered conversations. While giving a critical presentation to the largest client of the company, Andrew's thoughts strayed to Jessica. He started characterizing market trends in terms of digestion and consumption, using increasingly strange and incorrect language. The customer squirmed uneasily in their chairs and exchanged anxious looks with Andrew's supervisor while the latter tried to turn the meeting around. Andrew was summoned to his supervisor's office the next day. He was given the option to be fired or take a leave of absence to deal with his evident personal problems. After having a flash of insight, Andrew accepted the leave of absence, seeing it as a chance to spend more time with Jessica and take action on his growing obsession. As word got out to their social circle about Andrew's work problems, dinner party and community event invites stopped coming in. Howard's, the golden couple started to feel more and more alone. Jessica immersed herself in her painting, caught between her growing fear of Andrew and her love for him. Her paintings, which were before praised for their vivid hues and upbeat subjects, started to have a darker feel. Noticing the struggle that motivated it, critics lauded her new work for its frightening images and unadulterated emotion. As the fall foliage cascaded outside their windows, Andrew and Jessica were trapped in a deteriorating dance like binary stars in the silence of their home. There was an obvious tension between them, like a ticking time bomb about to go off. They had no idea how close they were to the point of no return, or the horrible shape that explosion would take. During his leave of absence from work, Andrew discovered he had a lot of spare time, which he used to indulge his wildest ambitions. What had once been a mere notion to devour Jessica had grown into a pervasive addiction. Somewhere, deep within his disturbed thoughts, a scheme started to take shape. Andrew started by gathering the required equipment. He bought a few things, all of them seemed innocent enough on their own. But when seen in the context of a larger scheme, it was chilling. Heavy-duty plastic sheeting, seemingly for a home improvement project, a large freezer delivered under the pretense of stockpiling food for the winter, and a new set of sharp kitchen knives ordered online to avoid suspicion as he gathered his bleak collection. Andrew lost himself in his studies. He studied the human body with a cold, professional fascination that belied his genuine aims, spending hours reading over anatomy textbooks. He studied sedative strategies, analyzing the benefits and drawbacks of several medications and approaches. Within a journal tucked under a loose floorboard of his findings, sketching out plans and contingencies. Andrew's thoughts were mostly focused on the technical components of his plan, But he was also thinking about the psychological effects of what he was thinking about. He attempted to justify his inclinations, persuading himself that his behavior would be an act of pure dedication and love. Consuming Jessica would guarantee them eternal togetherness, in his deranged imagination. Her spirit becoming an indestructible part of him. As his scheme came together, Andrew was trapped in a never-ending conflict inside himself. Occasionally, lucid moments would emerge from the mist of his fixation, leaving him appalled at the thought he was having. He would have thought of telling Jessica everything at these times and pleading for her assistance and pardon. However, his sinister cravings always had a bigger pull, drawing him back into his bizarre world. In an attempt to discover how far he could push his relationship with Jessica, Andrew started to test the waters. He experimented with culinary novelties. He probed Jessica's ideas about the afterlife and the relationship between body and soul, observing her reaction intently as he described foods that teetered on the verge of taboo. He also started debates about death and the essence of existence. Deeply uncomfortable to Jessica, who was already on edge due to Andrew's unpredictable conduct, were these chats. When he gazed at her, she detected something different in his gaze, a hunger that seemed to transcend simple desire. Her instincts warned her that something was awry, even if she couldn't pinpoint the exact problem. Andrew felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement as his plan came closer to fruition. He was aware that there would be no turning back once he started. The life he'd created. His long-maintained facade of normalcy would be destroyed forever, but he could no longer resist the urge to carry out his sinister fantasy. Andrew got more and more unpredictable in the closing days before his intended act. He would go through phases of intense energy when he would give Jessica all of his attention, and gloomy phases when he would withdraw inside himself and hardly see Jessica at all. Their house was a fever pitch of tension. The morning broke cloudy and gray, but both Andrew and Jessica sensed that something significant was going to happen. Only one of them understood the full extent of what lay ahead. Jessica awakened to find Andrew's side of the bed vacant and the covers cold, echoing the gloomy atmosphere that had descended upon the neighborhood. Andrew got more and more unpredictable in the closing days before his intended act. He would go through phases of intense energy when he would give Jessica all of his attention, and gloomy phases when he would withdraw inside himself and hardly see Jessica at all. Their house was a fever pitch of tension. The morning broke cloudy and gray, but both Andrew and Jessica sensed that something significant was going to happen. Only one of them understood the full extent of what lay ahead. Jessica awakened to find Andrew's side of the bed vacant and the covers cold, echoing the gloomy atmosphere that had descended upon the neighborhood. She discovered him carefully honing a set of knives in the kitchen. Her spine tingled at the sight, but she was at a loss for words. Jessica remarked, a little shaky in her voice, "Andrew, you startled me." Andrew raised his gaze. His glaring eyes were very unnerving. He answered, "Everything's perfect, my love." His tone was strangely serene. "Just getting ready for an elegant supper this evening. I want every detail to be flawless." Jessica tried to hide the increasing knot of terror in her gut as she attempted a smile. She said, "That sounds lovely. Can I be of any assistance to you?" Andrew gave a headshake. Focusing once more on the knife he was holding. He whispered, "No need. This is supposed to be a surprise. You simply unwind and relish the day." Jessica withdrew to her studio, unable to shake her uneasy feeling. Her fingers trembled too much to keep a brush firm when she attempted to bury herself in her painting. Rather, she sat at her desk and wrote a letter to her parents that she never intended to send. She expressed her deep concerns regarding Andrew's actions and her mounting sense that something was seriously amiss in their union. Even though she knew the poems would never be read, writing them felt cathartic. In the meantime, Andrew approached his preparations with a systematic precision that was in stark contrast to his insane goals. He carefully arranged his instruments, set up the sedatives he intended to employ, and lined the basement with plastic sheeting. Every move he took was supported by an internal monologue consisting of a perverted reasoning that rationalized his schemes as expressions of love and loyalty. Neighbors began to observe strange behavior at the Howard house as the day went on. Bessie, the friend of Jessica who lived across the street, saw Andrew loading and unloading different stuff from his car on several occasions. Her curiosity kept her from calling Jessica to see how she was doing, so she decided against it. While walking his dog, an elderly neighbor named Mr. Grayson noticed rising voices coming from the Howard residence. He held back. Jessica's voice was high and scared, and Andrew's was lower and more sinister, and I struggled to make out the words, only the tone. Inside, the argument that Mr. Grayson had heard was coming to a head. Andrew's actions had become unbearable for Jessica, who had confronted him about them. With tears streaming down her cheeks, Jessica went to Andrew and told him how scared and confused she was by the way he was acting and how their relationship was changing. She implored him to come clean and tell her what was going on. Andrew tried to keep his cool as he saw his well-thought-out strategy fall apart. He replied in a mysterious way, claiming she wouldn't get it and that his actions were motivated by their love. Jessica started to back off, sensing the ominous undertone in Andrew's statement. She proposed to stay with her parents until they could resolve their differences and suggested taking some time apart. Jessica's expression abruptly shifted as she turned to walk away. He took hold of her arm firmly to stop her from leaving. He said that he wouldn't let her go and that they were meant to be together forever, his voice taking on a foreboding quality. Jessica realized the full extent of her husband's insanity as she looked into his eyes at that very moment. With a clarity that broke through her anxiety, she realized that she was going to die. Jessica knew the following few hours would decide not only whether or not her marriage would survive, but also whether or not she would survive at all. Andrew's grip tightened. The issue had gotten to a critical stage when the sun started to set and lengthy shadows spread across the living room of the Howards. Jessica, with a bruising on her arm from Andrew's hold, she stood motionless, her thoughts racing to figure out how to escape this nightmare. "Please, Andrew," she begged, straining to maintain her composure. "Let's discuss this. We can overcome whatever is ailing us together. We have access to assistance." Once warm and loving, Andrew's eyes were now burning with a frantic intensity that chilled Jessica to her core. He continued, his voice uncannily calm, "Don't you see? We can only be genuinely together for eternity in this way." Andrew never let go of Jessica's arm while he spoke and started to lead her towards the basement door. Jessica's pulse pounded. She had a gut feeling that she might not make it back up those steps if she let herself go. Jessica stepped hard on Andrew's foot and turned away from him in a desperate attempt to get away. As Andrew recovered and leapt in her direction, she dashed for the front door, her fingers fumbling with the lock. Andrew forcefully closed the door just as she was succeeding in prying it open. The loud sound reverberating across the peaceful suburban road. Hearing the disturbance outside, Mr. Grayson, on his way back from his evening stroll, stopped short. He could hear voices growing louder within the Howard residence, their shouts muffled. He walked toward the home, ready to call for assistance, his fingers lingering over his phone out of concern. Jessica went inside and became stuck in the kitchen. With trembling hands, she took a knife off the counter and held it in front of her. Her voice faltered as she admonished Andrew to stay back. "Although I hope not to injure you, I will if necessary." Andrew hesitated, staring at the knife that Jessica was holding. He said, "My love. You don't understand," that sickeningly beautiful tone of his. "This is ours. I am going to unite us. You will always be a part of me." Andrew leaned in closer as he was speaking, grabbing for something in his pocket. Jessica knew she had to do something when she realized, horrified, what he meant. She let out a terrified, desperate yell as she threw herself forward, the knife slicing across Andrew's extended arm. Andrew recoiled, feeling more shocked than hurt, gazing intently at the small streak of blood forming on his skin. The jolt seemed to clarify his head for a little while. He said to Jessica. His voice grew abruptly tiny and disoriented. "What's taking place?" Jessica felt a wave of hope as she noticed a glimpse of her husband in those perplexed eyes. She murmured softly, lowering the knife a little, "Andrew. It's all right. We are capable of overcoming this. Allow me to assist you." But the epiphany was short-lived. Andrew's eyes grew icy again. "The insanity is back in full swing." "No." He snarled. "It's past due. We've advanced too far." Andrew rushed forward with unexpected force, removing the knife from Jessica's grasp. He seized her, his might overpowering her attempts to free herself as she yelled out in pain and terror. She was being pulled toward the basement entrance by Andrew. Jessica fought against him, her heels scuffing the beautiful hardwood floor. Mr. Grayson had had enough noise outside. He was prompted to intervene by Jessica's calls for assistance and the sounds of fighting. He called 911, reporting a domestic disturbance to the dispatcher in an anxious tone. Jessica broke free inside the house once more and made a mad dash for the stairs in an attempt to get to a phone. Andrew followed her, anger and frustration twisted on his features. A vase toppled over and shattered on the landing beneath them as they battled. Beatrice noticed the noise. She had been keeping an increasingly wary eye on the Howard residence all evening. Behind the curtains, she noticed frenetic movements of shadows. And perceived what appeared to be a scream. She too made an immediate contact to 911. Her voice, like Mr. Grayson's, calling on the cops to move quickly. Andrew became aware that his well-laid preparations were falling apart as distant sirens started to cry out. He doubled down on his attempts to control Jessica in a final, desperate attempt to realize his deranged ideal. At the top of the stairs, the two struggled, hovering precariously near the brink. The sound of tires squealing and car doors slamming came from outside just as Andrew appeared to be winning. The terrified calls from worried neighbors had alerted the police, who had now arrived. Beams from flashlights sliced through the encroaching night outdoors. The fate of Andrew and Jessica's sad love story was still up in the air as they continued their last, desperate struggle. The deafening cry of police sirens broke the silence as squad cars converged. In response to the frantic reports of a domestic disturbance, officers leapt from their cars with their hands on their holstered firearms. Andrew and Jessica heard the sound of slamming car doors and frantic voices outside and froze inside the house. Sensing her opportunity for escape, Jessica escaped Andrew's hold and screamed for assistance as she hurried down the stairs. Andrew's thoughts were racing due to the abrupt change in his schedule. When he got to the bottom of the stairs, the front door exploded open, revealing 2 police officers with their pistols drawn and dropping to the ground. He hesitated for a critical second before giving chase. An officer spoke forward now, forceful and authoritative. Confronted, Andrew made a last-ditch attempt to grab Jessica. Many things happened at once in that moment. With her momentum helping her to the safety of the cops, Jessica dodged out of the way. Andrew lost his balance and fell, and the officers quickly proceeded to grab hold of him after sensing a threat. Andrew was thrown to the ground in a blur of movement. The handcuffs clicked into place and his arms twisted behind his back. With all sanity gone, he thrashed and screamed uncontrollably, seeing his twisted illusions fade away. A female cop took Jessica, who was crying and trembling, and gently walked her outside. Beatrice had hurried over as soon as the police came, and she fell into her arms. On the street, neighbors gathered to watch the drama develop in stunned stillness. Judged mentally ill to stand trial was Andrew. Was admitted to a mental health center with strict security. His case would end up serving as a cautionary tale of obsession gone too far. Doctors found it difficult to comprehend the depths of his hallucination and how his love had turned into something terrible and horrible. The Howard home was deserted, a mute witness to the catastrophe that had nearly happened there.